You're going to be a pro at this by the time we actually get it on video. I'm almost done, too. I know we've got to do some other stuff.
Well, I have as much time as you have.
Okay, I think it's going to work now. I think maybe I had used up too much space, but I deleted a video. I'll just keep an eye on it. Okay, one more time. You were saying that Grandpa Albert had to give some money from his life insurance policy, y'all's life insurance, to pay for the legal fees.
For his part, I believe.
Okay, because he couldn't, like the church members didn't have enough money. Was that why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had to raise a certain amount of money, and legal fees are legal lawyers and court costs are very expensive, and the churches couldn't afford to do all that. So those ministers who were sued, see, it was a personal suit.
Yeah, wow.
To all of the members.
Wow. And so his name was on one of them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And one other thing about the split in the church at Durham, the pastor of that church was a distant cousin and a very good friend of your grandfather.
Really?
So that was a friendship that was broken.
Really?
And then after the church split and the congregation went with the pastor, then the church, the local church that was left had to have a pastor, so they had to have substitute pastors, and some of the pastors volunteered to go and preach for them or pastor their church until they could get a regular pastor. So your grandfather at the time had to retire because of his health. But he was able to go to Durham and supply some in that church until they got a pastor.
And you would go?
I went a few times, but not every time.
And how did just that whole situation and the whole time that all that was going on, how did that make you feel?
Well, like I mentioned before, I just thought it was unnecessary. But still, at the same time, I knew that it was his responsibility to do what he had to do, and I needed to support him in it.
And you mentioned you felt like that was one of those times that his job, or like those responsibilities, crossed over into the family because you guys had to take out that money from your life insurance. And what did you said you just felt like that was unfair, that they couldn't settle it outside of the court.
I felt like it would have been a better thing had they settled it in the conference and with the conference and the state convention of churches rather than bringing it to the courts. But the church property was one of the reasons that they brought it to the court, and then that involved the members of the ordaining council.
This article says that this brief period from 1958 until 1962 was perhaps the most unpleasant and unsettling time in the history of original Free Will Baptists.
That's good.
Yeah, you felt like that. And
that's the way I felt.
Yeah, and y'all just happened to be one of the families that was directly involved in it.
Yeah.
Let's see. I guess we already talked about a lot of the different positions that you were in the church. How has God continued to like call you into ministry in different positions through your life in the church or outside of the church? Or
You mean now?
sure.
Well, since I'm homebound mostly, there's not much I can do. I don't do as much as I should. But I try to keep in touch with the church and support it as much as I can.
Mm-hmm.
And still, I'm still as interested in all of the activities, but I'm just not able to physically do
Mhm.
the things I did.
Mm-hmm. 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 What kind of hopes do you have for the Free Will Baptist Church? I mean, the church in general, but specifically our tradition. What kind of hopes do you have for the church?
Well, as you know, I hope that women can have a more prominent part. Because it was, in the beginning, the women supported the church, just as we mentioned the scripture in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's becoming more, I don't like to use the word liberal, maybe that's not the right word to
Mhm.
use. But I think that the women are beginning, I know that they are beginning to have a more prominent place in the church.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think it'll only be a matter of time before the other conferences allow the ordination of women?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I think if that doesn't happen, that the churches will, the churches that don't agree with the women's part in the church, I think that they might become an organization of their own.
You think there'd be another split?
I'm just not sure how many churches will continue to hold on to
Mm-hmm.
to the belief that women are not supposed to. I think more churches will begin to realize that women do have an important part.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the pastoral preaching ministry in the church.
In the ministry of the
Mm-hmm.
church.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's happening slowly.
Mm-hmm.
It's happening.
I feel like it will because as years go by, a lot of the leaders of the church, when I was a young person and a young adult, and in the church, are no longer with us.
Mm-hmm.
And as each generation comes along, things change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I hope and pray that our denomination never uses its belief or its purpose. But I do believe that the future generation will be more liberal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And on some things, you're saying you think that's okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just because of, I think that it goes back to the part that women were subservient to the man in the beginning,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
in the families and in the denominations and the generations. And I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing,
Mhm.
but women are becoming more dependent.
Dependent.
Yeah, or independent. Women are not as dependent on the men as they used to be.
Mhm.
And it's not that a woman wants to overstep their purpose in the family.
Sure.
I don't believe in that. But I think it's supposed to be equality.
Mm. Mm. You mean like at home and in the church?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm. That's pretty cool. Mm.
Because in the wedding vows, the man and the woman make the same vows.
Mm. Mhm. Did you feel like that when you first got married, or did you? I mean, you've mentioned, used to be. So did you feel like when you got married that there were different roles to be played?
There are still different roles to be played.
Okay.
But each person should know their role, and each partner should be willing to allow that person to have their role. Because way back to the beginning, and I can remember when this actually happened, the men sat on one side of the church and the women on the other.
Mm-hmm.
And that no longer happens.
Uh-huh.
And that's just an example of one change.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like the women have them offices in the church is another change. And just things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. So you would still maintain different roles, but even within those roles, equality.
Mm-hmm. That each partner or each member should recognize the other's position and support it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's a good way to say it.
Does that, so give me an example. Like, does that stand with, like, so if a couple got married and the woman said, I feel like, God has called me to be a pastor, then for the husband to say, I support you in that, and I accept that as who God is calling you to be, and it's my job to support you.
That's a good example, and that should be, that decision should be made before there's a wedding ceremony, if possible.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we were married when your grandfather was called to the ministry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And see, I did not marry a preacher.
Did you ever think that you would be a preacher's wife?
Not really. I thought that we would work together in the church,
Uh-huh.
but I never thought he'd be a pastor.
What was your initial reaction to, oh, he's going to be a preacher, so I'm going to be a preacher's wife?
It was something I have to accept.
Yeah.
But I accepted it like it was something it's something that I should do
Uh-huh.
to support my husband.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm human enough to say that there were times when I thought, how would it have been had it been another way?
Sure. What was he working for the mail service when you got married?
Yes.
And he kept doing that. He
did.
continued to work for the post
he
office.
did that, and went to college at night,
Mm-hmm.
and did a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. So y'all both stayed really busy.
Anyway, he had a big garden, and that was one of his outlets, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you help in the garden, or did he do most of it? Was that his thing?
He did most of it.
Hmm. He liked doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Man, you got good vegetables and everything.
Oh, yeah.
That's good. I don't think I have any other big questions. Let's see.
I remember one time, the pastors' wives would have occasion to get together
Uh-huh.
and talk about our families.
What did y'all
and
talk
different
about?
Things. Our families and our husbands, how they had to be away at times. And one of my friends who was a pastor's wife said, I don't know how the congregation think we get our work done. Do they think angels come down at night and do our work? She was talking about how much was expected of the pastor's wife.
Mm. What did that look like what did congregants think you were doing or you were supposed to be doing?
Well, they thought you were supposed to be at all the church functions, and when your grandfather was a regular a full-time pastor, then there was an opportunity to work with the women in the church more
Mm-hmm.
than the churches that were a distance away.
Mm-hmm.
When he was just an itinerant pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And you could develop more friendships and
Mhm.
things were different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's cool that y'all got to get together.
Yeah.
Did any of them have stories too about, I didn't ever think I'd be a pastor's wife?
I don't remember that subject, but I remember times we would get together because some of the pastors and my husband were on the boards, church boards,
Uh-huh.
and we would have meetings, and the wives would go, and the wives would have their little sessions, and the ministers would do their
Oh,
work.
that's cool. And y'all just organized among yourselves? Like what you would do at your sessions and your conversations?
Well, it was not organized because we'd meet at different places,
Mhm.
like if the ordaining council was meeting at one place, then the wives would sometimes go, and the wives would do things while the ministers were doing their work.
Were the kids with you?
Not all, no.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-mm.
That's pretty cool.
The kids were with us when we visited the churches, but when we have a special meeting, like I'm talking, or more social
Yeah.
gathering, the wives would do something while the ministers were having their meetings.
Mm-hmm. And the kids would stay home or with family.
Mm-hmm.
That's fun. I bet y'all had some good conversations.
Yeah.
Well, I think.
And there was one time that when my smaller children were really sick,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like I needed my husband with me that night. And pastors, of course, can be called at any time.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lady in the church that, this is not real personal, but it's getting kind of personal, I guess.
That's all right.
But she would call, she was, describe, but anyway, she would feel like the pastor ought to be there for every little thing.
Uh-huh.
And I remember one night about 2 o'clock in the morning
Oh, wow.
that 2 of our children were sick at the same time, and a call came that she wanted the pastor, and he had to leave me and the sick children to go to the hospital.
Uh-huh.
And that was his duty. And
Uh-huh.
there were some of the things that was you had to deal with.
Mm-hmm. How'd that make you feel?
It kind of made me feel like, well, now, I know you have your duty as a pastor, but you have your duty as a father and a husband, too. That's one of those times when you're ambivalent, kind of.
How did it make him feel? Did that get
Well,
on?
he didn't want to leave,
Yeah.
but he knew it was his responsibility. So that was a hard choice for him also.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure. So you kind of, or did you kind of feel like there was always this, like, give and take of him being your husband and father, but he was also kind of looked after this congregation, and those lines kind of got blurred sometimes. Did you feel like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be human if I didn't say yes.
Yeah, I think that's fair. What was the best part about being or playing the roles that you did in the church?
The friendships that we made during his ministry, and the friendships, not as many now, but the friendships that I have now that I would not have had he not been a pastor.
So you mentioned that you, like, on the one hand, you feel like you kind of missed out on some things because you're traveling so much, but you also feel like you do have relationships now that you just wouldn't have had you not been a part of a family
That's true.
Was in ministry.
Because recently the pastor of Pine Level Church brought a young lady that he's dating to see me when I was in rehab, who was a little girl, and one of our former pastors.
Oh, really? Right, so interesting. A small world.
And then we, all those friendships, and that was good. But then on the other hand, I didn't have the opportunity to be as close to my neighborhood and family, extended family, and the friends in my home church as I would have had he not have been pastor. And now I'm not as close to the neighbors as I would have been. But then on the other hand, I have friendships with the churches, so you see.
Well, is there anything else that I didn't ask about that is important to, like, who you are or your faith and what it means to you to have grown up as a Christian in a Christian family, and then
Or my children and my grandchildren. And I'm growing up, I never thought about your father being a minister. And he just decided, I guess you heard that story of how he decided to become a minister.
I hadn't. Or maybe I haven't, I forgot it.
well, see, he was 13 when, your father was 13
Uh-huh.
when, his father died.
Uh-huh.
And he was still at home with me.
Mhm.
And, my other children were away, either married or in college. And it was just he and I here. And, we were members of the Smithfield Church.
Mhm.
And we had been to prayer meeting one night. And your father he was really smart in school. And he had registered in Appalachian State College.
Huh. Yeah.
And paid the registration fee and everything. So we went to, Preacher Woodall was our pastor
Uh-huh.
in Smithville, and we went to prayer meeting one Wednesday night and came home. And I had my sewing machine in the hall down here. And he went upstairs, and I thought he'd gone to bed.
Uh-huh.
And I went out to the machine and was going to do a little bit of sewing before I went to bed. And he came down and he said, Mom, I want to talk to you about something.
Uh-huh.
And I said, okay, what? He said, about school. I thought, oh my goodness, he's decided not to go to college. And here we paid the fees and everything. So he said, I've decided I want to go to Mount Olive and be a preacher like my daddy.
Hmm.
I'm sorry. So I don't know if he would ever become a pastor or not. I don't know. I guess that's a good way to end the story. Except the fact that later on you made the decision you did. And the other children had you wonder how things would have been had it been otherwise, but the fact that your grandfather was a minister, I think, had a great influence on their lives.
Sure. Sure. Well, thanks for telling me your story.
Well, I think there's probably some things I left out, but I guess I said enough.
I have time. Is there anything else that
Well, I don't think I mentioned anything about growing up on the farm. I don't know if you...
Sure.
But, as I said in the beginning, I was born at home place. And that's where my father's siblings all lived on the same farm.
Uh-huh.
And we would gather for every Sunday. All the families would come together at my grandmammy and grandpa's house.
Uh-huh.
And we had enjoyed our cousins.
Uh-huh.
And we didn't have a lot of social activities. And the church related was our social activities. And but one of the things that the grandchildren like for me to tell about is how we picked the geese feathers for our feather beds.
Oh, what'd you do? Just pull them off?
Just pick up the geese and hold them, and you laugh and pull off the feathers.
Did they seem to notice?
They squawk a little bit.
Did you pull them all off?
No, just the ones underneath the down feathers. And then the one about, this is the one Jordan likes to hear, about my grandpa's feather barrel.
Okay.
When they pulled the feathers off, they had a barrel out in the, called it the smokehouse where the meat and everything was. And we put the feathers in that barrel, and my grandfather was not an alcoholic, but he did take his little drink every night before bed, and he had his bottle in the feather barrel.
Was he hiding it?
Yes. And the neighbors, as you know, we didn't have a lot of social activities.
Yeah.
And the neighbors would come over at night, you know, and we'd call it, the neighbors would come to set bedtime. And we would, the sitting room at that time was my grandfather and grandmother's big bedroom with a big fireplace. And that's where we'd sit in the, at night. But during the day on the big front porch and the rocking chairs. But anyway, we had a neighbor who would come over, and we didn't have running water, we call it, in the house, but we had a pump out on the back porch, and that's where we would get our water to drink. So the neighbor would say, his name was Preston, and he'd say, "I'm going to go get a drink of water." So when he would be gone for a while, and when he would come back, you could see the feathers on his arm. He'd reach down in Granddaddy's feather barrel.
Oh, that is funny. You're getting water, huh? That's good. I hadn't heard that story before.
That's one of Jordan's favorites.
That's good.
You want us to get in there and make that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
I'm disappointed we don't have the right kind of sausage.
It's the right. It said kielbasa on it.
Well, it's a little bit different from what I got before.
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks for doing this.
Well, I don't know if I want to hear it or not.